So, apologies. I was going to get to this a long time ago because of all the reactions to Rings of Power, the so called true fans of Tolkien have gotten angry over some very non existent things, but some things were so categorically laughable and silly, even the fans of these kinds of channels were like, yeah, you're pretty much completely wrong. I don't think you understand the mythology of J.R.R. Tolkien. Seems like you only watch the film, don't know very much about Lord of the Rings, but we'll try to be generous. We'll start off with the really laughable stuff and get to the more intermediately stupid but perhaps valuable points that are being made by Jeff Hicks of World Class.
We don't need stupid, pointless entertainment like Lord of the Rings, The Power of the Rings. Like Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. First off, if you don't realize, I have had to stop myself multiple times when talking about Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, because I keep calling it Lord of the Rings, The Power of the Ring. It's a stupid title, The Rings of Power. Isn't there only one ring? Like in the damn line, one ring to rule them all? One ring to find them? And I don't know the rest because I don't watch Clerks 2 enough. You have the same word twice in the title, and it seems a little, I don't know, lazy? There are a bunch of words. I'm not going to take the time to look up and find you an exact number, but there are even more made up words from Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. Yet you have to call it Lord of the Rings of Power. Okay. It's very, very generic, and the show looks very generic itself. One of the things.
Well, to be fair, even fans of the books are sometimes confused about this. Now, the way I interpreted the famous One Ring to Rule Them All is, for lack of a better word, the Master Ring can rule the other 19 rings. But there are other rings. Yes, there's the One Ring, but there are the 19 rings. So apparently he forgot about the 19 rings. So he doesn't seem to know that Galadriel has one of the 19 rings. He doesn't seem to know that the Nazgul have their rings. He doesn't know the dwarves have their rings. He honestly thinks, well, why talk about rings of power? There's only one ring. Like Amazon, really? Even I knew that. I only know the films. There's just one ring, right? And it's like, no, there are other rings. As a matter of fact, even those 20 rings, there are other magical rings in the mythology. There may be some confusion when you're referencing a ring of power because yes, there is the one ring and those 19 other rings, but there are other magical rings in the mythology, just to be clear. But now let's jump into the heart of the matter, which is clearly he doesn't know Lord of the Rings, but he does know something else, and that seems to be what really gets him angry.
Now we're going to have a new point. Well, The Lord of the Rings was great, The Hobbit sucked, but this TV show it's terrible. Think of it like this. I'm from the future. Yes, clearly. This is like Star Wars. The Lord of the Rings trilogy is the original Star Wars trilogy. The Hobbit is the prequels, and now we have this expanded universe, and welcome to the sequels, folks. Lord of the Rings fans, welcome to the pain. Welcome to the pain that Star Wars fans feel, that comic book fans feel, that James Bond fans feel, and Ghostbusters fans feel. Lord of the Rings, welcome. You're now just one of the boys. You're no longer the king of kings of IPs. Well, it's
So basically, he's mad about the Star Wars sequels. Amazon is making the Star Wars sequels because Star Wars can be compared to everything. Now, to be fair, yes, George Lucas acknowledges he did take a lot from Lord of the Rings. That's pretty clear and obvious. He's borrowing. I'm going to be nice. He's stealing, but he's borrowing a lot of elements from Lord of the Rings. But you got to be honest, he really dumbed down what Tolkien was up to. So, yes, there is a consistent theme about greed and selfishness versus compassion in Lord of the Rings, but Tolkien took the time and effort to create a complex mythology, a complex philosophy, a complex theology. You can still criticize it because it doesn't make sense at various points, and sometimes it's laugh out silly, but he made a serious effort. George Lucas did not. He really constructed a very flimsy mythology. You can still appreciate Star Wars, but it's not that deep a mythology. It's just, oh, okay, Vader bad, sabers, force thingy relevant. That's about it. So, but apparently the Star Wars sequels have really ticked him off. That's nice. That's utterly irrelevant to this conversation, but it's nice to know the motivation of these, quote, Tolkien fans are really Star Wars. Well, that's nice, but it's not got much to do with Lord of the Rings as a mythology. Hate to break it to him. But now let's get to the finally genuine point he makes, but even there, he kind of messes it up.
series will do justice to the author's legacy. I should stop cutting in, but I can't help it. But all this talk of striving ambition makes it sound suspiciously like the inflated price tag is really just another willy-waving exercise from the man who brought us a wildly phallic space rocket. Lest we forget, the show's billion-dollar budget was directly generated by a business which pays its workers poverty wages, saw them pee in bottles during the shifts, and suggests they keep working even as a tornado literally destroys their workplace. What a better way for Bezos to spend all those ill-gotten gains on the grandiose parable about the dangers that come with great power? If Bezos is really that much of a Tolkien fan, he's no doubt familiar.
The YouTube channels that are positive about Rings of Power, they do acknowledge this basic kind of bizarre thing that, yeah, Bezos kind of is similar to Smaug, and Smaug is definitely not a good character. He's not, quote, a good person, quote unquote, because he's a dragon, he's not a person. So it seems a little strange you'd be positive about Rings of Power if Smaug is making it. But the obvious problem with that is that's not logically relevant. The aesthetic work has its own quality. We judge that primarily. Similarly, the fact that Shakespeare grew up in to put it mildly, a much more unequal time in Britain as a history is interesting and it is relevant, but at the end of the day, we're judging the Shakespeare works, not Shakespeare the person, and Plato and others and so on and so forth. This is just basic logic. There's the aesthetic qualities and the political qualities of a work of fiction. That's just basic logic. So why he's ranting about these things makes no sense. And does he really care about these things? Does Jeff Hicks really care about capitalism, communism, democracy? Is he really a student of political economy? Is he doing comparative studies on Scandinavia versus Canada versus Sri Lanka and how much workers are being paid by Amazon? Probably not. But let me finish off that a lot of people get upset that I'm calling all these people Nazis and racists and alt-right extremists. Well, Jeff is not a good guy. He seems to know his comic books. He seems to know Star Wars. That's fine. I know comic books too. I like Star Wars too. They're not relevant to Tolkien, but so be it. But for those who don't know, Jeff is black. So he's not a white commentator. Is he a hater? Yes. Is he ignorant? Yes. Is he a bigot? In some ways he is. Is he stupid? Oh, definitely. With Lord of the Rings, he made a complete fool of himself. But he's not a racist, as far as I know. And he's not an alt-right extremist. In fact, he actually liked Multiverse of Madness, which has upset Mauler and a few other people. And I agree with him on Multiverse of Madness, by the way. So he is many things, but sometimes he's a little bit more moderate. But on this one, yeah, he doesn't really seem to know Lord of the Rings at all. And if he's representative of, quote, the Tolkien fans upset at Rings of Power, then it's pretty obvious these Tolkien fans aren't really Tolkien fans. They seem to be Star Wars fans who saw the films and like the films. That's fine. That's great. It's not relevant. So their contribution to this debate about Rings of Power as an adaptation is pretty much zero because Jeff Bezos may be schmaugish in certain ways, but he's not literally a dragon. And Schmaug himself is not a corporate CEO. He may be a symbol of, quote, the evils of capitalism.